Forget everything your school book told you about Pompeii. That loving mother wrapped around her child as the ash comes down, the image on postcards, in documentaries, on museum walls, the symbol of the tragedy of Pompeii. Modern DNA analysis says, wrong. It wasn't a mother, it was a man. And the child next to him wasn't even related to him. For over 100 years, we looked at these bodies and poured a touching story into them. Tragic, romantic, but not true. And that one image is just the beginning. The better our technology gets, the more the pretty legend of Pompeii crumbles, and underneath, something far more uncomfortable appears. A city that looked disturbingly modern, people who died in ways that don't match our favorite stories, and a past that refuses to stay inside our neat textbook version. Pompeii wasn't an ancient alien backdrop. It was a city that feels eerily familiar, right up to the moment it disappears. Imagine you wake up in Pompeii. You don't go to a fire pit in a hut. You put on your shoes, open the door, and step straight into a busy street. On your left, a stone counter with big round jars sunk into it. Steam rises up. It smells like stew, like wine, like fresh bread. People are leaning on the counter, talking, laughing, eating, standing up. There were more than 80 places like this here, Thermopolia. Ancient fast food joints. Most homes didn't have a real kitchen. Cooking was outsourced to the street. You go out and grab your food, fast food, in 79 AD. The walls around you aren't empty. They're covered in writing and images, election slogans, vote for so-and-so for city council. Insults, so-and-so is an idiot. Love declarations, dirty jokes, ads for gladiator fights, party invitations, wine prices. Walking along the walls of Pompeii feels like scrolling an ancient social media feed. Short messages, quick thoughts, crude drawings, political calls. That's the first lie our school books tell, that antiquity was cold, orderly, and quiet. Pompeii was loud, chaotic, scribbled over. A city constantly talking to itself, and right in the middle of it all, women, who almost never show up in the classic narrative. We know the names of women who ran taverns, of female bakers who owned their own shops, of women who appear in business records, as owners, as lenders, as partners. One of them, Vibia, a baker. Her name appears in Pompeii, and years later again in Puteoli, a harbor near Naples. Same name, same profession, same style of signature. What does that tell us? That a woman from Pompeii lost her city, but not her craft. She fled, and somewhere else she opened a bakery again. The city died. Her business model didn't. Pompeii is fast food on the street, graffiti on every wall, women running businesses, erotic frescoes in dining rooms, myths, violence, sex, politics, all out in the open. Does that really sound like a distant, primitive world? Or more like a raw, turned-up version of our own? And above this city stands a mountain, not a glowing, lava-spewing cone. A green, quiet hill covered in vegetation, peaceful. People here see it every day. They plant vineyards on its slopes. They celebrate festivals. They mention it in inscriptions. They didn't call it a volcano. For the people of Pompeii, Vesuvius was just a mountain. The word volcano didn't exist yet. There was no science of volcanoes, no theory of plate tectonics, magma chambers, eruption cycles. There were only gods. Much later, as the Romans slowly began to understand, that fire could come from inside the earth, they tied that destructive power to the name of their fire god, Vulcanus. From Vulcanus you get the Latin volcanus, and from that, our word volcano. Our modern natural disaster still carries the name of an ancient god. But for the people living under Vesuvius, he wasn't a volcano. He was a sacred, fertile mountain. Dangerous maybe, but not as a geological machine, just as the mood of the gods. We have no evidence. That star constellations warned them of the eruption. No apocalyptic alignment in the sky. The signs came from below, not from above. Dead animals, drying fountains, strange tremors. Today we can read those signs. Back then, they read God's. Days before the eruption, animals start dying in low spots. They just drop, as if the air has been switched off. We know now, carbon dioxide can pool in those depressions, heavier than air, invisible, odorless, a deadly, silent puddle of gas. Back then, all they saw were dead animals. Maybe a bad omen, a message from the underworld, but not a clear run. Deep underground, magma forces its way into cracks, lifting rock, warping the landscape, first millimeters, then centimeters. Too little to see with the naked eye. Enough to break an aqueduct. The water that supplied Pompeii came from the mountains. Roman engineers had calculated the slope perfectly, until the mountain itself began to bend those lines. Modern models show the pressure of rising magma changed the gradient in places, so the water no longer flowed correctly. Wells went dry. Fountains fell silent. People stood at empty basins and wondered, where did the water go? Today we can simulate that, in 3D, with data, with geophysics. Back then it was just strange. One more puzzle piece in a disaster that nobody recognized as a disaster yet. And then there's one detail that makes the whole story feel like cosmic mockery. According to ancient sources, the eruption happened right after the Vulcanalia, the festival in honor of the fire god Vulcanus. The day before, Romans had sacrificed to their fire god. They begged him to keep flames away from their homes. They pleaded for protection from destructive fire. And the very next day, their mountain spits fire, ash, and death into the sky. For us, it's a coincidence on a geological timeline. For the survivors, it must have felt like pure cruelty. They celebrate the god of fire. And right after that, their world burns. Later, writers like Cassius Dio report visions of enormous figures, seen in the ash cloud and on the mountain. People swore. They had seen giants, demons, gods moving in that dark column. We would say lava fountains, lightning in the ash plume, chaotic turbulence in a pyroclastic column. They said, Vulcanus is furious. The giants are rising from the mountain. The gods have had enough. No star omens, no mystical constellation. The catastrophe itself became the myth. The mountain is the altar. The cloud is the god. The more precisely we understand the physics behind it, the better we understand why they saw giants in the smoke. And then comes the day we think we know by heart. August 24th, 79 AD, or as more recent studies suggest, maybe a date later in the year. Even here, the textbook story starts to slip. Pliny the Younger, a Roman writer, describes how a cloud rises like a pine tree into the sky, a giant mushroom of ash, gas, and rock. For hours, fine, hot pumice rains down. Roofs can't take the weight. People flee from their homes, trying to shield themselves with pillows, cloths, helmets. For a long time we believed that most people died in minutes, suffocated or burned by a pyroclastic surge. Today we know that's only part of the truth. New excavations, especially in the last few years, paint a different picture. Archaeologists are finding skeletons, not just wrapped in ash, but crushed under collapsed walls. Bodies that didn't fall where they were first surprised, but in places they tried to reach for safety. Interior walls collapsed later, stones smashed skulls, roofs came down after the first phase. Not in the initial ashfall, but during a second, heavy quake, in the middle of the eruption. Pompeii died twice, once from what fell from the sky, and once from what collapsed above the survivors. And we now see, many people were still alive by then. Here's a number you almost never see in a school book. About 90% of the inhabitants survived the eruption. 9 out of 10, they ran. They fled the city, along country roads, through olive groves, toward nearby towns whose gravestones later carried their names. Down at the sea, others tried to board boats. But pumice, light and full of air, formed a floating layer on the surface. Oars bit into nothing. Ships barely moved, trapped in a heavy soup of stone. These weren't clean, cinematic deaths. They were chaotic, desperate movements, not the sudden annihilation of a whole city in 1 second. We love to tell. Modern research takes that simple, dramatic line away from us. It replaces it with something messy and human: panic, luck, bad luck, aftershocks, timing. And while we're getting better at reading the dead, we're only just beginning to understand the scale of the survivor's story. On tombstones in other cities, you find inscriptions like Domo Pompeii's, Greece, from the House of Pompeii. People effectively saying, "I come from that city that no longer exists." They built new lives in Cumae, Naples, Ostia. Some even came back to the ruins. Excavations show that people continued living among the destroyed houses until at least the 5th century AD. Not as proud citizens of a thriving town, but like residents of an ancient favela. Between collapsed walls and open courtyards, they threw up rough new partitions, reused scraps of marble and fresco. For much poorer purposes, the once luxurious upper floors, often gone today, were turned into storage, sleeping areas, cheap housing. Digital reconstruction projects show what those upper stories used to look like: big, bright rooms, delicate wall paintings, balconies overlooking the street. It wasn't some maze of slave cages, like old Hollywood images of Rome like to suggest. It was prestige architecture, luxury, status. And again, technology tells us our favorite images of antiquity are wrong. Not just about the mother and child, but built right into the floor plan. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes that Pompeii wasn't a sealed-off provincial backwater. DNA analysis of the skeletons shows many inhabitants carried genetic traces. From the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece, Asia Minor, the Levant, people whose ancestors came by sea, traded, migrated, stayed. Pompeii was a node, cosmopolitan, louder, more mixed, more international than our schoolbooks will ever admit. And then there's the way. These people defined luxury, how they celebrated, what they painted on their walls. In 2024, archaeologists uncovered a room. That looks like a black dream. A banquet hall with deep black walls, broken only by glowing scenes from Greek myth. Heroes who fail, gods who trick humans, feasts that end in violence and blood. It's as if they painted their nightmares right onto the walls, to look at them while they ate. Soon after, researchers discovered a private spa area, steam rooms, pools, frescoes, depicting the cult of Dionysus, ecstasy, wine, trance, naked bodies, borders dissolving in ritual. Pompeii had private wellness spaces, luxury baths inside houses, which, in the dark, in candlelight and steam, were certainly a lot more than just washrooms. Is that the world of a simple ancient people? Or is it something we recognize from modern cities too? Clubs, bathhouses, private rooms, where different rules apply? And then there's the part we're not really supposed to see. Under every city-run pipes, basements, drains, sometimes tunnels. The Romans were masters at building underground aqueducts, sewers, shafts, crypts. In Pompeii, we only see a fraction. Much is still buried. Much is too dangerous to open up. We know there were large sewer channels, cellars, voids. We know wealthy houses often had multiple levels below street level, storage for wine, grain, and maybe hiding places. When a city goes into panic, when ash blocks the streets, roofs fall in, where do you go? Up or down? We don't have a neat map of the secret escape tunnel of Pompeii. Anyone claiming that is lying. But we do know this. In extreme situations, people use every structure they know. Basements sometimes connect neighboring buildings. Sewer lines run under entire blocks. It would be naive to believe No one tried to get out through that underground world. If you've watched our video, Why They Sealed These 12,000-Year-Old Tunnels, you already know, once you go below the surface, the smooth version of history almost never holds. The more tech we throw at Pompeii, the creepier it gets. CT scans show us bone positions that don't match the old romantic interpretations. DNA kills off family dramas we invented around the bodies. 3D models rebuild houses that don't match our slave cell fantasies. Geophysics explains why the wells dried up long before the mountain exploded. What we're learning is this: school books tell stories that are clean, closed, easy to digest. Real cities are not clean. They are modern, long before we allow them to be. They're chaotic, contradictory, alive. Pompeii wasn't a frozen moment of a distant civilization. It was a pulsing city, full of people who are a lot more like us than we're comfortable admitting. People who ate fast food, who wrote on walls, who loved wellness and private luxury, who saw their own darkness in the myths they painted around their dining tables, who lived in international networks, who took their businesses to other cities when their home vanished. The pretty legend says, Pompeii died in one night. Everyone died together, frozen in their final poses for us to look at. The brutal truth that modern tech forces on us is this: most of them ran. Many died later, not in cinematic fire, but under a falling wall. Some built new lives in foreign cities. Others squatted in the ruins for centuries, in a ghost city that never fully died. And the ones we see today, the plaster bodies, the faces in ash, don't automatically tell the stories we want them to tell. We stand in the ruins, look at a supposed mother and child, and feel so sure. That's what happened. Science says, no, it didn't. Every new device, every new analysis,